I started to turn down plans with friends. I was avoiding hugging. I was
Mm.
avoiding touching other people. And it became all about hiding it. For the longest time, I was in complete denial that I had shame around hyperhidrosis. The more you push away from something, the more it flares up within you. I was able to reframe it. So instead of looking at sweat as something to be ashamed of, I was able to empower myself even with sweat. Getting back into our bodies is a huge starting point.
You're listening to the Sweaty Girl Society podcast, a show for women with hyperhidrosis where we share tips for living better with excessive sweating. I'm your host, Karina. Now let's get into the show. Welcome back to the Sweaty Girl Society podcast. In this episode, we're speaking with Megan Cameron. Megan is a hyperhidrosis advocate, a health and wellness coach, and the founder of Empowered by Sweat. I think you're going to love this conversation. Hi, Megan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's always nice to connect with a fellow Canadian. So you're out west, right?
Yep, in Alberta.
Okay, I'm on the other side of Canada in Ontario, but it's always nice to see Canadians in the hyperhidrosis space doing amazing work, which is certainly what you are doing. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation today, talk more about the services and what you offer, your take on hyperhidrosis. So why don't we start with your personal experience? Can you walk me through your journey with hyperhidrosis? What was your earliest memory and how have you navigated it?
Yeah, so my earliest memory was back when I was a teenager. I have primary hyperhidrosis. So it started at puberty. And I remember having patches of underarm sweat within minutes of getting dressed. And it wasn't related to heat, it wasn't related to anxiousness, it was just my body doing what my body does. At the time, I didn't know what it was all about. I remember holding my arms down tightly as a kid and layering shirts. I remember it was grade 8. I just wore sweatshirts all the time and big, baggy sweatshirts.
Yeah.
And just feeling like I needed to hide. So that was my first memory of it. It felt isolating and that I was different. I started to turn down going to functions at school. I started to turn down plans with friends. I was avoiding hugging. I was avoiding being touched and touching other people. So it affected relationships and it became all about hiding it. And I felt like I was constantly managing myself and trying to stay ahead of what my body was doing. So at the time, of course, we're young, we don't know these things. I didn't know what hyperhidrosis was. And as I got older, I started to learn more and more. And I went through the processes of trying different treatments. And from trying different treatments, it really opened up my eyes to what was possible for me and how much it had affected my everyday life and the decisions and the careers and the relationships that I had made growing up. It wasn't until I started to learn more and find community and that I was not alone and that there were other people out there in the world that had this condition or was struggling with the same sort of thing that I really was able to learn more about it for myself and what it meant for me and who I became because of it or with it.
I think that so many people listening who have hyperhidrosis can relate. I can certainly relate. And I feel like so many of our stories are so similar.
Mhm.
So, in terms of where you are today, your business is called Empowered by Sweat.
Mhm.
What does that mean to you?
Well, what I've learned as I've gotten older, I was able to reframe it. So instead of looking at sweat as something to be ashamed of and something that was my fault and something that I had no control over, I was able to empower myself even with sweat. So I called it Empowered by Sweat because throughout my journey, I've actually been able to use sweat to empower me to really discover who I am, work with shame, work with embarrassment, work with other people to do the same sort of thing and live with sweat if I choose, as opposed to living against it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think that's a really hopeful message and hopeful idea. So I want to dive into this a little bit more, going back to your story about hiding your sweat and how so many of us learn to hide our sweat over the years, whether that's through baggy sweatshirts, not touching people, keeping our arms physically close to our body. Why do you think there is so much shame and a need to feel like we need to hide our sweat? Where do you think that comes from?
I think a lot of it comes from stigma and social norms and what is considered normal. Now, I believe that's changing a little bit because with social media being the way that it is and people speaking up a little bit more about like conditions and diseases and neurodivergency and all of those things, I think it's opening up a door for people to explore things that aren't considered normal. And I see that with hyperhidrosis and people talking more and more about it. So I think that because the way society views sweat, there's a lot of shame behind it.
When we think about shame, what is the difference between shame and embarrassment, and how does shame work?
Great question. Because I really had to dive into this one myself because for the longest time, I was in complete denial that I had shame around hyperhidrosis, which is, I mean, looking back to me, I'm like, yeah, it's so obvious that it's there. But I just assumed it was loneliness, embarrassment, anxiety, all the things, but I never could label it as shame. Brene Brown has been a great resource for me because she studies shame, right? That's her thing. And
Yeah.
I've dove deep into a lot of her work. And one of the quotes I really love from her is if you put shame in a petri dish, it needs three things to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. And hyperhidrosis literally hands you that on a silver platter. So it makes sense that we have shame around it. And it also makes sense that we may not want to talk about shame. So when we look at it from different perspectives and just say, we talk about it from the perspective of embarrassment, it's not I feel embarrassed. I was saying I am embarrassed. So that's the difference with shame in particular is that you embody it. It becomes who you are as opposed to being like, I feel this way. It's a feeling. A great example she uses is guilt. So I am guilty as opposed to I feel guilty. There's a totally different energy that comes with the
Mm-hmm.
two of them. So with hyperhidrosis, we really, and I'll speak for myself, we're not living with hyperhidrosis. We are our sweat. So we think
Yeah.
about it morning, noon, and night. We live our lives to manage our sweat as opposed to living our lives to live.
Hmm. Yeah, I do love Brene Brown's work. I remember coming across it for the first time and it really speaking to me. And I think when we think about shame, it's that sense of I'm different, I'm alone, and I want to keep this a secret. For me, when I think back to my earlier years, especially my early teenage years, I think those were the most difficult years for me. Those are difficult years anyways because we're trying to fit in. And then when you layer on hyperhidrosis, some of the most painful memories, maybe, or the most painful experiences crop up during those years and shape our idea of who we are. So when I think back to when I was a young teenager, there were a couple defining moments that I'll never forget that really set me into like a shame spiral. And I think deepened this idea that my sweat made me yucky or gross or different. And one of those moments was I had some childhood friends in the neighborhood and they were boys and they would roughhouse a little or like try to take me down or whatever. And there was one day where one boy grabbed my hands and the other boy grabbed my feet. And then they started to like swing me back and forth. Can't remember if it was like for my birthday or something, you know. But in doing so, my arms were above my head and my armpits were exposed. And I was wearing a light colored shirt and I had big sweat stains under my armpits. And they both stopped swinging me and they were like, oh my gosh, why are you so sweaty? Like, ew, you know, gross. And they put me down. And in that moment of having my arms physically lifted above my head, my body wanted to keep my arms closed, and being exposed in that way was so, so deeply shameful for me in that moment. Looking back on it now, I've sort of like thought about it and processed it. But in that moment, it sent me into such a deep shame spiral. It was so triggering. And I think I went away and cried in the bathroom. That was one of the experiences I can remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing because these stories stick with us. And sometimes we get sometimes stuck in those moments and we're living from whatever age it was that we were to like now, like it brings it back. And we may not have the emotions attached to it if we've done work on ourselves, but we remember them. I remember in particular, and you know what's fascinating is over the years when I've been working with people and then on the community and hearing your story and things like this, there is not a particular moment that I had wherever I was like called out for my sweating, which I find
Hmm.
fascinating. Yeah, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So there
Yeah, I do because there weren't many of those experiences that I had. Typically, people didn't notice, or if they didn't notice, they didn't really care. They moved on with their life, right?
yes, yes.
But when you have hyperhidrosis, you are so hyper aware.
Oh,
The potential of people noticing.
yeah. And it's the stories that we're telling ourselves about it, right? So,
Hmm.
for example, I was back in high school and I had this huge crush on this boy. And I was wearing a sweater, and having a crush makes you a little extra sweaty, right? Because you're nervous.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
remember watching a basketball game, and he was sitting beside me, and I was just drenched in sweat. And I was not as worried as much about the sweat showing because I had mastered the art of pinning my arms down and wearing clothes that hide it. But I could do nothing about the smell. That in particular bothered me more than sweating. But
Mm.
see how like I can remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, 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 it's true. And I think in sharing my memories, had I shared those memories when I was in my mid 20s, I probably would have started crying telling you those stories, right? I'm in my early 40s now, and so I feel more detached from those times, but they're so deeply, I guess, ingrained or embodied. It's taken me years to even share that and not feel shameful sharing those stories.
I ask
It's
Can I
interesting.
ask you what is allowing you to be able to share those now, apart from being older?
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe that is it. It's being older and being more comfortable in my own
Mm.
skin, having educated myself about hyperhidrosis and realizing that this is a legit medical condition, and even if I've been dismissed over the years, it is valid and my experiences are valid. I would ask that back to you. What sort of interventions can we do in terms of building our confidence and our resilience around sweat?
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with, well, owning it is a one big thing, like
Mm.
being
Mhm.
accepting that this is what my body does. That's a big part of it because the more you push away from something, the more it flares things up within you. Resistance to things can be difficult. I find that it really helps to be less past focused and more future focused. What got us here today isn't going to get us to where we want to be in the future, right? So, reframing the way we look at our bodies, reframing the way we look at sweat, having compassion is a big one. And like I said, I couldn't remember any stories where I was actually called out on my sweat. It's because all the stories were coming from me. I was telling
Mm.
myself how gross I was. I was telling myself how awful I was.
Right. And imagine how hard you were working to hide your sweat.
Yeah, yeah.
The amount of labor that goes into hiding.
Right. Yeah. Exhausting, right? Because it's
Mhm.
going 24/7 in your mind, in your nervous system. So, a big part of what I do is help people work with their nervous system. I help people to kind of drop down into their bodies and pay attention to what their body is doing and why their body is doing these things. And I have found that there's a huge disconnect between our bodies and our brains. I believe a big part of that is because we just don't trust our bodies anymore, right? We don't want to touch them. We don't want to have anything to do with them. We're so mad at them because
Yeah.
they've just so much trauma in our lives. Getting back into our bodies is a huge starting point. And
Mhm.
and yeah, acceptance and compassion.
Yeah, I can really relate to that idea of getting back into our bodies. I think over the years, I felt like my body was working against me, like it was betraying me. In the summer specifically, I get quite sweaty and I get swollen on my hands and feet, and it makes it physically uncomfortable. And I'm like, oh, just like frustrated with my body. But when I was younger and, those shame spirals, even in my 20s, 30s, I'm sure it would happen now in the right situation, right? Like the shame spiral, those moments where you're spiraling, you feel so out of your body and disconnected. So, what are some coping mechanisms we can do in that moment to try and come back into our body?
Yeah, great question. Especially in the moments, right? Because those are the ones where you're not thinking, you're just reacting, right? So,
Mhm.
a few tools that I've found have worked really well for me, but then also the people that I work with is it's called heart focused breathing. Do you mind if I walk us through?
Please, yeah,
Okay.
please. I'm curious.
So I'm trained in something called heart math. I don't know if you've heard of it, but some of ours might be. But
Yeah.
so you put your hand on your heart and then you focus your attention in the area of your heart and imagine
Mm-hmm.
your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual, finding an easy rhythm that is comfortable. So we do this for about 30 seconds, and you can do it with your eyes open or you can do it with your eyes closed. I've learned to do it with my eyes open because in those moments, right? It's hard to be like, you can't.
Yeah, give me 30
Yeah,
seconds
give
while
me
I close
30
my
seconds.
eyes. Yeah.
And you just breathe
Yeah.
in and out and focus on your heart or chest area. A lot of silence during your podcast, so we don't have
Mm-hmm.
to do the full 30.
Mm-hmm.
But it just brings you right, like for me and the people I work
Right back into your body.
back in your body. And the beautiful thing about it is it helps build that coherence between your brain and your heart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the tools I use. And then another one that I love is just as simple as like rubbing your hands together, your fingers together,
Mm-hmm.
because then you're paying attention to and focusing on that
Right. Bringing
back
your
into your
focus
body.
back into your body.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
In my 20s, I did a lot of yoga and throughout my 30s too, but I think that equipped me with a lot of coping mechanisms that I didn't realize at the time, but that mindfulness, that sitting in your body and feeling the different parts of your body,
Mhm.
those sorts of mindfulness practices can be really helpful.
Mm.
That's lovely. And so, one thing that I struggle with is if we think about primary hyperhidrosis for a moment, one of my triggers is humidity or stale air or air not moving.
Mhm.
So, that's, I feel, an environmental trigger of some sort.
Mhm.
But then another trigger can be social situations. And so I feel that's a little bit of social anxiety,
Mhm.
perhaps. It's hard to distinguish to me sometimes if I can reduce my anxiety, will I be able to effectively reduce my sweating? Is there a feedback loop caused by feeling the sweat coming and then being more anxious about that? And so you sweat more? I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? It's a tricky one to pull apart because I don't think we can just control it with our mind, but I also think that there is a mind body connection there.
Yeah, I definitely believe that there's a mind body connection. Not necessarily to the point of it stopping hyperhidrosis. I'm not by any means an expert, but there's something going on in the body. We don't know exactly what's causing it, which is fascinating that we still don't know. But
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of
yeah, a
unknowns.
lot of unknowns. But I definitely can talk from my experience in that I have absolutely been able to reduce how much I sweat, but not to the point of it being gone.
Right. Yeah. And I guess it's about controlling the triggers that you can control to
Right.
the extent that you can control them.
Right.
Because I think when I look back at my relationships over the years, when I first met my now husband, those first dates, I would sweat a lot because I was excited and he was a new person and it was stressful. It's all those different emotions wrapped up. And now when I'm with him more than a decade later, I never sweat. I'm very comfortable and at ease. He's not a trigger anymore, right? So that tells me there is something here in terms of the mind body connection and how we can potentially work to develop some mechanisms that can help calm our mind and then therefore reduce our triggers where possible.
Yeah, and I think recognizing, like you were saying, that shame loop,
Hmm.
being able to get yourself
Mm.
out of that shame loop by bringing yourself back into your body is a really great tool that I've used for myself and for others because it's interrupting that, right?
Yeah, being
Yeah.
aware is sometimes very powerful first step.
Yes. Yeah. I find a lot, as we talked about earlier, that we're very hyper vigilant when we're sweating. Like we're very focused, hyper aware of it. And I wonder, and I'm curious about how many people, when they focus on how much they sweat, are they also focusing on how much they aren't sweating? So are you noticing the moments when you sweat as much as the moments that you're not?
Yes, and then the moment you notice you're not sweating, that's when
Yes.
I at least start to feel those tingles in my
Right?
hands and my feet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the sweat's back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to switch gears and talk about
Mhm.
community. You mentioned community earlier, and that has been a major source of connection and strength and transformation for yourself. Can you talk a little bit about community and how that can be helpful for somebody with hyperhidrosis?
Yeah, absolutely. I find that being part of a community helps break the silence and helps with the loneliness. Having a safe place to go to talk about what's going on with you helps calm your nervous system, for one thing, helps you be able to acknowledge that you're not alone and brings that sense of being with like minded people and people that get it. We are meant to be with people. It's just what we do. We want to be part of something, we want to belong. It's very human of us. It makes us feel safer. All of the research tells us that. So when we feel isolated because of, let's say, a condition like hyperhidrosis, we can feel very unsafe. And our nervous system is always like in that fight or flight, being very vigilant and always aware, right? But if we are part of a community that helps us to feel safe, then it helps calm our nervous system. It helps us feel like we are belonging to a community of people who we can speak our truth to.
Yeah.
But it also opens us up to being vulnerable, which opens up the door to shame too. So I think that it's very important that you choose the right community and that you feel safe in it.
You feel safe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I know that you are very involved in helping to build community. You moderate a Facebook group, which I can link to in the description. And I know you're part of our community at Sweaty Girl Society. And so I think that the more work we can do to create various communities with different ways of accessing them and trying to keep them a safe space, that can only help facilitate conversations, normalize experiences, and bring people together in new ways. They just make you feel so much less alone and so validated that other people are experiencing these things. It's not just in your head, it's real and it's legitimate.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I love about community is that you connect with people all over the world. We're all humans. And that's the one thing that connects all of us is that we're humans and our experiences may not be the same, but our feelings are all the same. That sense of loneliness, that sense of embarrassment, that sense of anxiety, and that like, me too, I get it, you get me. The beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where I started.
Yeah.
Yeah, was with the community. So it was a big part of it for me.
Yeah. So, can you tell everybody listening sort of what you're up to these days, what's up next, what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing, well, I'm still a big part of the community. I'm still monitoring the Facebook group, but I'm looking at creating a paid membership community because I feel I'm able to make it more of a safer space for people, if that makes sense. So,
Yep.
and for me, I have to be safe in my own space in order to be able to help others to feel safe in their own space. So
Yeah.
that's something that's in the works and is going to focus a lot on the wellness and shame around hyperhidrosis and allowing people to open up and feel that they are empowered.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm very future focused. And then I also have a new group coaching program opening up in January,
Oh, great.
which is all about like heart math and that heart and brain connection and helping people calm their nervous system and work with their nervous system.
That's really exciting. And do you offer one-on-one coaching as
I
well?
do. Yep. Yep. That is anytime. I do a free discovery call. So talking to me and finding out if we're a fit to work together is very important because again, it's around that safety too. If I don't feel safe
Mm-hmm.
around you,
Yeah.
don't feel safe around me, we're not going to be able to open up and do the work we
Be
need.
the right fit.
Yeah.
What's one piece of a hopeful thought you would leave people with who are maybe having a bad day with their hyperhidrosis or feeling in need of a little bit of support? What's one thing you would say to people?
I think the biggest thing is remembering that we're not alone and that everybody in the world has, and not to dismiss what we're feeling, but everybody in the world has pain one way or another. But where our choices lie is in whether or not we struggle. So we can work on the struggle. So even though our bodies may be doing the things that they're doing, you're not alone in it. And there's people that you can reach out to and talk to.
Yeah. Research shows about 5% of the world's population has hyperhidrosis, which equates to about 385 million people, we think.
Yeah.
So that is a big number. We are truly not alone. And like you're saying, nor do we need to go through this journey feeling alone and isolated and plagued by shame and embarrassment. So I love that. So where can people find you, Megan?
At Empowered by Sweat. You can go to my website, or I also have Megan Cameron Coaching, or you can find me on the Facebook page.
We'll definitely link it.
And I'm in your group as well. I have to say that you creating a space for women is so impactful and so important, because although the research says women and men both equally struggle with hyperhidrosis, we carry shame in different ways. So I think opening up a safe environment is really important. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you do. I love talking to you each time we have a conversation. I leave feeling inspired and a little bit more hopeful. So thank you for everything you do. And thank you for your time today, Megan.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Sweaty Girl Society podcast. If you liked today's episode, join our free membership community at sweatygirlsociety.com/community.